Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Happy Tuesday. Good morning. Greetings from Nashville. We are here for the Elite Series, the On3 Elite Series. We got some of the best members of the class of 2025 coming as we speak. They're working their way here from the airport. I got Pete Nakos. I got JD Pickell. It's an all-star cast, star-studded, and the real stars are coming later. They're the ones that you would like your team to sign. And gentlemen, we're going to talk about what it's like to be a top recruit in 2025 today. We're going to talk about ideal official visits. These guys are about to embark on something pretty fun. Now, they've been recruited for a while now, but it's about to get hairy. You know, the uncommitted guys, JD, I think may be committed here by the end of the summer, a lot of those.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're getting to that point where you're slowly but surely starting to narrow down the list. You know, you go through whenever you're like, dating a girl, you go through that talking phase, and then it becomes a point like, hey, what are we? Kind of determine the relationship. I think those guys are getting close to that. But this is awesome, man. Twitter timeline come to life for all the On3 people. This is phenomenal, and I'm glad to be here with y'all.
Look at Pete's got the quarter zip already.
Good look.
We're ready to roll here.
Good
brand.
We're ready to roll here. I mean, yeah, in a big month coming up, David Sanders, the top uncommitted prospect in the nation, 5-star offensive tackle coming off that Tennessee visit. Ohio State's in it as well. Going to be an interesting couple of days trying to catch up with him and see what's on tap in June.
It's a good offensive line class this year too. I was doing some I was looking at watching videos of Will Black, the Notre Dame commitment from Connecticut. How do they create these giants who can move like this as 17-year-olds? Like these people, and JD, I remember from high school, from college, like seeing these people as they were being recruited. They didn't look like this.
Yeah, the Wheaties formula has changed a lot in the last 5 years. But they are starting to, I think, put some extra juice in those things. And so it's good for us as college football fans because that makes the Saturday product 10x more enjoyable. So I'm excited for that.
It is so much fun. And we'll get into what they're about to be doing and who we're going to see. I mean, there's a lot of really good people coming. But we're going to talk about what's going on down in Destin, Florida. Destin, to be specific. We always argued about what the dateline would be from the SEC spring meetings back in the day. So Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, talked on Monday night. Obviously, every question was about the House versus the NCAA settlement. What happens now? Pete, you and I talked about this a bunch last week. Greg Sankey saying to the assembled crowd, and Ross Dellinger from Yahoo posted this, I've not had one athlete call me and say, I want to be taxed like an employee. Do we need to explain to Greg Sankey how 1099s are actually much more difficult to file than W-2s?
Greg Sankey's comments Sunday night set off another social media firestorm of people questioning why college leaders believe this. And then Greg Sankey goes on to say, Andy, and I know you and I also talked about this, that Congress needs to step up. The same thing we've heard for the last 33 months or so. And he also made sure, though, to mention that he doesn't envision anything happening until after the November election. So yet again, we're on an elongated calendar.
Yeah, maybe I think he's just sort of prepping everybody to let them know what's going to happen. Like this is going to drag out some more. The other thing I think, because Greg Sankey learned a lot from Mike Slive, his predecessor. And Mike Slive was a big under-promise, over-deliver guy, work in the shadows, and don't say what you're actually up to. I do wonder if some of this is trying to thread a needle with Congress, because you've talked to some folks, Jason Stahl and Jim Cavall, who want to organize athletes.
Right.
And they have said, you could do this. You could have collective bargaining without the athletes being employees, but that might take an act of Congress. Could that be the needle they try to thread? Because the schools definitely don't want them to be employees.
Right. I mean, it could be a needle they want to thread, but I think there's a lot of hesitation that there's going to be momentum behind that. Talking to Jason Stahl and Jim Cavell, like you mentioned, and I think part of that reason is there's still a huge divide in college athletics. We saw right after that House settlement, Notre Dame officials came out and called for congressional action to make sure that athletes are classified not as employees, which is something that everybody wants. But I just think that there's still a significant divide, and yet again, we're going to have to go see if Congress wants to get anything done. And obviously, that's going to take some bipartisanship.
Thomas in the chat, 1099 is no more difficult than the W-2. Yeah, it is when you got like 6 of them. And nobody's helping you with Social Security either. You're paying for all of that. So, yeah, It's funny. All the folks in our business who've been freelance writers are like, no, I like the W-2 way better. JD, did you imagine you'd be talking tax forms today?
Every single time I get something like having to do with NIL or anytime like Congress is in the headline, I'm like, hey, Pete, what are you doing in 10 minutes? Can you jump on the show and explain this to me so I can understand what's going on? My whole thing is like, can we get more adults in the room? Can we get the adults in the room that know how to manage money and kind of have a gauge for what's going on?
I don't think the U.S. Congress is the people we want to talk about it.
I mean, any adults. I'll take, head coaches if they got the right idea. Greg Sankey if he's got the right idea. So, Pete, I defer to you 9 times out of 10, 11 times out of 10 on this topic. But yeah, it's a wild place in college athletics, and here we are.
It is crazy. I mean, that's the thing. Like these SEC coaches get here. So let's talk about the SEC spring meetings in Destin, because this is an event I've covered a lot of times, and it's always interesting. Perhaps my favorite moment, the year Lane Kiffin was Tennessee's coach. They had a meeting downstairs. They moved where the football coaches meet, but back then the football coaches met downstairs, and there was an elevator that could take them directly up to their rooms, and that's what they would try to escape through when their meeting broke. And I just remember watching Lane Kiffin walk out of the meeting, and everybody's running to the elevator to try to interview Lane Kiffin. Behind him is Steve Spurrier, who was then South Carolina's coach, yelling at Lane Kiffin. Like, I don't know what Lane had said, but it had irked Steve Spurrier. And it was like Steve Spurrier basically laying down the law of like, you think you're the person who needles people in this conference? I am the person who needles people in this conference.
What a room.
It was spectacular. But so this is interesting because this is the first year since 2007 that Nick Saban is not in that room.
Yep.
And you add
Steve Sarkisian and Brent Venables.
Exactly. So Texas and Oklahoma are there. Their coaches are there. Their ADs are there.
Yeah.
We get to see the 16-team SEC kind of in its full glory. And that makes it feel a little more real, like seeing the burnt orange and seeing the crimson and cream there. JD, when you think about a few years ago, it was 2021 when we learned that Texas and Oklahoma were going to join the SEC. It felt so far away.
Yeah.
They're going to play an SEC season in a couple of months.
The weird thing that I think the On3 main Twitter account tweeted out was they're starting to put the SEC logo down on DKR. It's this is happening.
Yes.
This is not just going to be a thing that we talk about for the next 2-3 years. Like, it's really happening. And I mean, it's going to be so bizarre when we look at the conference standings October and we're like, oh, Texas and Oklahoma, here's where they stack up next to Alabama, Georgia. Like, that's going to be so bizarre. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we're here. Like, the new era has started and we're jumping into this thing head first.
So who runs that meeting, Pete? Who do you think? Because I imagine Nick Saban's words held a lot of sway. I've been told that when Ed Orgeron was at LSU, he was pretty a very active participant in all those. Because some coaches just kind of want to hang back. Some coaches want to be very much in control of all the issues that they're discussing. Who do you think is the one that talks the most?
I'm putting my money on Lane Kiffin.
You think so?
Ooh. Well, in this new era of the SEC, I'm thinking Lane, because you look at it. I mean, I think Shane Beamer's getting there maybe a little bit, but at the same time, like Steve Sarkisian and Brent Venables maybe aren't 100% sure what they're about to walk into today.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer needs to feel this out. I mean, and Lane is probably one of the more proven winners right now in the SEC.
Yeah, well, and the other thing about Lane, and I think part of this is Lane, when he talks to us or when he talks to any media entity about NIL, about all the changes going on in college sports, he just says what he thinks.
Yeah.
He says out loud what all of them say behind closed doors. So I do wonder if the conversations may be a little more robust. Like Kirby Smart is very calculated about all this stuff. Anything that involves money going to the players, he's like, we'll do whatever the rules say we can do. We're good with that. Because he doesn't want to get painted as someone who's anti-paying athletes. That's, all these coaches want to be looked at as somebody who's going to make sure you get what you deserve. So I do wonder with those guys, like who's like Brian Kelly. We've talked a lot about Brian Kelly and him saying we don't buy players. I guarantee you Brian Kelly in that room speaks very differently than he does in an interview.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. I think the person I'd want to sit next to during those meetings would be Lane Kiffin, because I bet he's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like the off the cuff, like under, like, Steve
It's
Sarkisian
definitely
saying
under the
something.
breath. It's not-
He's like, this guy just freaking got here, man. He doesn't know about the SEC. You don't know SEC ball. Like, I bet he is a riot to sit next to.
Kirby, it definitely like is like the king of the court, or however
Rush
you wanna-
chair,
yeah. Like
Yeah.
there's no
The
doubt
rush
in that.
chair.
But like JD mentioned, like just sitting next to Lane, hearing his banter, I'm sure he's gonna mutter something when Greg Sankey says something. I mean, that's who I kind of look to at the moment.
I think Sam Pittman would be awesome to sit next to at this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine? Because
Yeah.
he's definitely got the running commentary going. And especially in his situation right now, he does not care.
No.
Because he's got to win a bunch of games or they're going to, they've already hired the interim essentially with Bobby
Mhm.
Petrino. So we know what's going to happen there. So he's going to be kind of don't care. Nothing can bother me here. Like
Yeah.
whatever I want to say, I'm going to say. So I would love to have him mic'd up
Yes.
for this meeting. If we get
I think
Sam Pittman mic'd up would be amazing.
I think Drink's on the up and up too.
Oh
yeah. Huge
The
off
Drink-
season.
Yes.
Took Caden Green from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot
Sign
of
Williams
yeah,
Nwaneri. Like, yeah.
Hey.
Mizzou's looking really good entering Destin.
What's he wearing to this thing? Because,
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
a huge
last year at
question.
media days, Andy, he pulled up and sat down with you. He's got gold Jordan 1s, and not like
Oh,
gold,
yeah.
like matte gold. It was like chrome gold. And I was like, oh, Missouri's about to do something this year. So I can only imagine.
The
bathing
silver ones are
suits.
about to drop, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you follow those apps, but the silver Jordan ones are about to
I need
drop,
to follow
so.
those out. I need to follow those if I'm not yet. Yeah.
But this will be fun. The one coach I imagine will not have a lot of fun on Tuesday is Billy Napier, the Florida coach, because we've not heard from him since he got sued by Jaden Rashada last week. There's not going to be much of a choice. Pete, I'm curious, does he say anything beyond, well, I can't talk about pending litigation, which, by the way, is the best cop-out ever, because you can use it for anytime you're involved in anything legal to just not say anything.
So, Andy, we were speculating last week. Does Billy Napier come out with a statement ahead of SEC meetings just so he doesn't have to answer questions? He hasn't done that. He's obviously going to be asked the question. We'll have our eyes tuned and ears tuned to see what he says. But I think beyond that, too, Greg Sankey mentioned last night he's not a fan of litigation. Well, obviously, Jaden Rashada has sued Billy Napier, the booster Hugh Hathcock, and the former Florida staffer Marcus Castro Walker. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's clear that obviously they haven't reached a settlement or anything in the last week. So I think Billy Napier is definitely going to have the spotlight on him at some point today.
Yeah, and I've had people say, well, Jaden Rashada doesn't want to get to discovery. They're just angling for a settlement. I'm sure they would like a settlement. I'm sure they would like some money. But here's the thing you got to think about when it comes to Jaden Rashada. He's a very dangerous person to have suing you, because we have already painted him as greedy. We've painted his camp as incompetent. We've painted them as, you name,
they've been painted as villains.
Yeah, you name it. We've already painted them in a bad light. They can't look worse than they've already looked. So they could drag this thing into discovery, and then it gets really messy, because there are things I'm sure that Florida would rather nobody get asked about anymore, especially not under penalty of perjury.
And just speaking with some sources, obviously the lawsuit alleged that Billy Napier promised $1 million if Jaden Rashada signed on National Signing Day. That lawsuit at the moment doesn't have any evidence to support that other than a text message from Jaden Rashada's father, Harlan. At the same time, though,
Which does not count.
Right.
Yeah.
But talking to sources, they would like to depose Billy Napier. I mean, sources on the Rashada camp said that.
Oh,
So
yeah, of course.
So that's going to be something to watch and see if anything comes from it.
Well, and you can ask anything you want in a deposition. It's not like you're in a courtroom where the judge is going to very narrowly, control the line of questioning.
Yeah.
So that's something that I don't think there's any sitting college football coach or none of us want to get dragged into a room and deposed.
No.
Because a lot of times the opposing lawyers just picking at you, trying to get you to say something you shouldn't. So I definitely, if I were Billy Napier, would not be thrilled about this whole situation, because it's just another JD. We've talked about Florida a lot.
Yeah.
It's another black cloud hanging over a season where he's already under a ton of pressure.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like walking into that room with the rest of the SEC coaches. like from a group chat, social dynamic standpoint, like how do you play that if you're Billy Napier?
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm thinking back to high school, something embarrassing happens. Do you just face it head on and address it right off the bat in the room? Do you kind of act like nothing happened? Like, how do you even go about that with all your peers?
He's got to throw out a well time. Well, Kirby's backup QB sued me.
Right. Yeah.
Something
subtle,
like that. Yeah.
Kind of subtle that kind of gets the room laughing, break the tension.
Oh, yeah.
It's out there now. That would be my play as well. But
Billy
yeah,
Napier
it's
very
wild.
popular among his fellow coaches. That's one of those things. Like you talk to other coaches, they love him. Like Kirby Smart likes Billy Napier a lot. I don't know. I've wondered about this. You guys have probably thought about this too. Like Kirby Smart is such a ferocious competitor.
Yeah.
Does his friendship with Billy Napier, how does that reconcile with his desire to beat Florida at everything every single day? I think that's probably the overriding concern for Kirby Smart.
Yeah, if I'm Kirby Smart, I think there's probably a level of we're in Destin, let's have a good time. But understand now, when we leave this building, we are not friends like that. Like I am not going to have your back. I'm not telling Jaden Rashada to call the dogs off, no pun intended. Like we are going after you. And that's what we're talking about on the football field. Have to imagine that that's the same when it comes to this whole situation around Rashada.
And the thing I've been thinking about this Rashada situation is like, how far does it drag out? Right.
Yeah.
It's about to be June 1. Fall camp is not very far off. And obviously Billy Napier would not like this to play out during the season. So how do the next 2 to 3 months play out?
Yeah, that's the tough part. And I would try to push it, delay it if I'm Billy Napier as much as I can, and just get this season going, because we'll know. I think we'll know in the first half of the season whether he's going to make it through this season or not. Because here's the deal: Florida's schedule is so hard that if you are 7-5, that's great.
Yeah.
It is improvement. It is you've beaten somebody who probably can compete for the SEC title at that point. If you're 8-4 for sure, like there's no question about that. You're good. 7-5, I think you're good too. So anything 6-6 or below is the issue. And those first 5 games are probably the most winnable.
And this is the situation that makes me fascinated by that 6-6 scenario, because I wonder how much this impacts benefit of the doubt for Billy Napier. 6-6, you're having a conversation about, well, how did they look versus those top tier teams? What was the margin of victory? And if it gets to a 50-50 split and you legitimately have the room divided on how you feel about Billy Napier, do you go back to Jaden Rashada and say, well, but we can't keep things in order when it comes to NIL. Let's kind of hit the refresh button.
This is what I always talk about in terms of PR with coaches, about how they deal with people like us. Because I always say, if you're going to go 1-11 or 11-1, it does not matter how you deal with us. You can be as nasty to us or as nice to us as you want. None of it matters. You don't need any friends in the media. You don't need any friends in the fan base. Like, you're either going to succeed, get extended, or get fired. It's when you're 6-6, when you're, different situation, different schedule, 7-5, that you've got to have some friends somewhere, whether that be in the donor base, or if the fan base loves you, that might help you get another shot. But Billy Napier's in that situation where I think he's done enough to make the friends he needs to make. He's got to win the games at this point. That's the hardest part. Is he's 6-7 and 5-7 in Florida.
Do we think going 6-6 and making a bowl game is enough?
I think it depends on the games. It depends on the 6 wins, and it depends on how you look in the losses. I mean, if you play the back half of this schedule with Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, if those are close games, I don't like, because the idea is you want to be competitive against those teams. Like, that is the goal. So if you can do that, I think you're fine. If you can't do that, then we know what's going to happen.
Get that win against Georgia, though. Have that feather in the cap. Hey, I'm just saying, if something crazy happens,
I'll take y'all back to 2014. Florida's going to the Georgia game. They have the press release written to go out on Sunday. We'd like to thank Will Muschamp for his contributions as Florida's coach. We'll be looking for a new coach. The press release was written. They threw a fake field goal to a grocery bagger, who then became a doctor, by the way. But a walk-on grocery bagger scores on a fake field goal. They beat Georgia, and Will Muschamp lives to fight another day. Now they lost to South Carolina a few weeks later. That was the end of that. But that's, to JD's point, that can happen.
Crazy things. To finish at Florida State, like those win-loss goggles, they come out, and you're like, well, actually, you know what? We did
Strong
beat Florida
close to the
State.
season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hey, we kind of that Jaden Rashada thing. NIL was new. It's an
Yeah, who knew what was
outlier.
going
And
on?
the guy that was the staffer is on the staff anymore. Like, let's run it back. You know, we did beat Georgia after all.
Exactly. Well, and I think now especially that rings even more true because in 2014, it's Mark Richt. Georgia's in that mode of, well, we're kind of underachieving. We could be better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Georgia is the center of the college football universe.
Yeah.
Like they are considered the best program in the country year in and year out. So that would absolutely make a huge difference if they were to be able to win that game in Jacksonville, which, by the way, not the only big neutral site SEC game this year because now you got that game in the Cotton Bowl.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Texas and Oklahoma isn't like they don't have SEC logos on the field for that.
That took me a second. I was like, Clemson and Georgia. That's
Wait,
not SEC.
that's not it.
That's going to be bizarre. And they're back to back.
That's not it yet.
Texas has Oklahoma, and then they play Georgia. That is brutal. Not to get sidetracked, but that is a wild.
Oh, yeah, it's also F1 weekend in Austin. So if you don't have a hotel room already, God bless you. Hopefully, there's a nice campground somewhere. Guys, we are in a lovely, lovely place here, the W in Nashville. And it's time for the Elite Series. We've got a bunch of the biggest recruits in the country coming. And I wanted to talk to you guys about what these folks are about to embark on because, you know, Pete, you've done a lot of reporting on this about what it's like to be an elite college recruit or transfer portal recruit, either one, in 2024, because the world is completely different now than it was 3 years ago. And you've been reporting on these transfer portal guys,
right?
And they have their own kind of, this is what I need. Like when they go on visits, a lot of times they're just going straight to the facility. Here's how we're going to use you. Here's a 1 hour super cut of how we'd use you. And they are like, yay or nay, based on the NIL offer. But the high school guys, how much more is it like the traditional old days where guy's going to take his 5 visits? Now, it's obviously the calendar's been moved. Thank you, Mac Brown, for that. But what are they looking for? What are these guys looking for when they go to meet with coaches and end up meeting with collectives?
I view it as like almost a hybrid model, right? You take what you see during the portal and then the traditional high school and meld the two together. And I think that's a really good description of the current high school experience. In the terms of athletes, some athletes do want to talk NIL on day one in their recruitment. It's a case-by-case basis. Every athlete is different. NIL for some is just factored in like facilities used to be. But yeah, I mean, at the same time too, these guys coming in today have sat in coaches' offices and talked to collectives and had their agent or representation speak to those folks. And they know what their value is. They obviously use the On3 NIL valuation, but they also have gone through this process, have an idea of what they're worth. And the other thing that I am looking forward to today is talking to some guys about the experience of it. I mean, I've talked to parents and I've talked to players in the last few years, and everyone's different. Some people say, I had a parent last year with a top recruit say a donor had to call in the top baseball recruit to get the package together.
Oh,
and that was kind of when the parent knew maybe this wasn't the best spot for us. On the flip side, though, some athletes feel really comfortable talking about it, and others feel like they've been lied to repeatedly by coaching staffs. Now, I think a lot of that is going to change in the years to come, just where the college sports model is headed. But that is the norm and where we're living now.
This is the first time collectives can actually give them something in writing.
Correct.
Because of something that happened in a federal court.
Right.
Where basically that you have the lawsuit filed by the states of Tennessee and Virginia. Other states have since joined. This was over Tennessee getting investigated basically by the NCAA.
They had it ready.
And the collectives, and I am talking to people from collectives saying, we hate this, that we can't negotiate in writing. Like we tell people stuff and then they come back and say, well, you lied to us.
Right.
Because it's just verbal.
Yeah.
But now there is no rule against them negotiating. Now they can't pay them anything until they get on campus.
No.
But they can negotiate the deal now and they can have it in writing.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about that. I've heard about some collectives exploring going on visits with coaching staffs in homes. I've heard of offer letters being sent out so that an athlete and their representation have a concrete idea of what they're going to make. I mean, and these guys coming in today, I mean, they've experienced it firsthand. I'll be surprised if not most or not all of them know exactly what they're going to be making when they enroll, because it's completely legal now. And as we know, the NCAA is really powerless over this at the moment.
JD, what are you demanding if you're a top flight recruit right now? Like, what do you do the Van Halen rider with the green M&Ms?
I don't know what the Van Halen rider is, but I probably would. So I think
they demanded an entire bowl full of well, I think they said a bowl of M&Ms with no green M&Ms. And the reason there was a reason for this, because if they saw green M&Ms, it means nobody read the rider.
Okay.
And they had a bunch of pyro and electrical stuff. And so they're thinking, okay, we got to be extra careful because we might get electrocuted on stage because these idiots didn't read the rider. So, because that's mostly what it covers.
Chess move. Okay.
Yeah,
I like that.
Exactly.
I like that.
So,
Smart.
I mean, this is an hour-long show. We could fill the next 2 hours talking about what I would demand in my NIL contract. I mean, I'm talking like cars,
look at
living
you.
situations, signing
You
bonus,
thought this through.
payments. Like, nobody asked me this when I committed to Cornell, so I've had some time to think about this. The NIL situations come to reality. Cars got to be top of the list, though, right? I just bought a car from a situation down here in Nashville. It was phenomenal, but I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, man, if I were a 5-star plus quarterback, my price range, the cars I'm picking from might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think, right below whatever I'm making on a monthly.
You'd have to find out how much an
basis.
oil change for a Lamborghini costs.
Sure. Yeah. I think I'd say to the GM, whoever's paying the bill, hey, you cool with this oil change? You good with it? All right, cool.
I got
We'll take
some
two.
bad news for you. If you're asking for a Lambo, I think you're probably only making 5 figures a month tops.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
It cuts out of
It cuts out.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So these guys have to manage their
Cars
budget a little
appreciate-
bit here.
That's what I wonder is like how much are these guys learning the real world stuff we didn't learn until we were into our late 20s, early 30s. Pete, you'll know when you get there. But you'll know when you get there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm in that boat with you, Pete.
Yeah. So certain things like what a car loses when you drive it off the lot.
Yeah.
Because I have noticed, like, I remember, knowing guys from high school and guys that I played with, and you see them again after they've been in the NFL for 15 years, and they all sound like CPAs.
Yeah.
Because they've been dealing with all of this high finance stuff.
Right.
And that's a lot to throw at you when you're that age. And because as a 17-year-old, like, I would have had no idea what to do. And my parents wouldn't have known what to do. They were high school teachers. Like we wouldn't have known what to negotiate. I'd be like, well, I got a Toyota Corolla. It runs.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm good, coach. I don't need
an
anything.
apartment. Count me in.
Yeah, I think I probably be like, can I? Well, maybe if I get like a new Camry, would that be okay? Wait, I can ask for a Corvette? What? That's a thing?
Walk on Andy Staples didn't have that.
No, you'd be amazed. Nobody had nice cars back then. Like, and this was University of Florida. Like, that news has been out for years. There was an agent paying a bunch of the really good players back then, but it wasn't massive sums. It was like $800 a month.
Yeah. And that's where everything's changed. And you're looking at 5 to 6 figure payments a month. I just reported this past week I knew a top transfer portal target was asking for 6 figures a month plus an apartment and a car. And I mean, that's a huge ask. So the athletes coming through here though are gonna have some top flight discussions with financial advisors, some agents, and they get to bring a parent too, which I think is really invaluable.
Massive.
Yeah,
Massive.
and this I'm glad we're doing this and having some people who understand the business talk to these guys, because they are getting plunged into something that is very difficult to understand. I just remember, I don't know how you felt about it, JD, with the recruiting process for me. Like, mine happened before the internet era.
Okay.
So you couldn't go, there was no On3 to look at to even see how the process worked. It was very mysterious. If you didn't know people, like we had people at my high school who'd gone through it, a year earlier than me. So their parents were helpful, but like we didn't know anything. And now you're being plunged into this world where there's agents coming after you. There's real dollar figures attached to all this. It's scary and it's exciting at the same time, but there's a lot of people that can try to rip you off. And so we're going to have some of the folks who know how this world operates, how it works, talk to these guys about how to navigate it, because that's something that you've got to be able to do that. And I know a lot of the schools have financial literacy programs that they've added that since NIL came in, but you're not getting that till you get to a school. There's nobody who comes in and says, right. but everybody's got advice for you now.
Mhm.
And now you've got to decide who you can trust and who you can't.
Yeah. So I came out when we were just starting to like put offers on Twitter, like blessed to receive offer from X
After a great
school.
conversation with Coach blah, blah,
Coach
blah.
X and X, and the guy's probably like, why does this kid keep tagging me? But the thing that I think is fascinating to watch with this whole NIL era, if you're a quarterback in this generation where I'm assuming you're making large sums of money as a senior in high school, going to be a freshman in college, I think the filter, if I'm a coaching staff, I run through the neck up portion with these kids is it's got to be drastically more intense. I mean, at this point, like you are the face of a franchise, so to speak. Like you are our first round pick in a lot of ways to be the future of this college football team. We can't have someone out there who wants to get a Lambo and make X amount of money and is going to have poor decisions that, you know, we don't feel good about when it comes to NIL. So I think that is really fascinating how that's going to evolve.
Well, I also think it is a filter. I think it's a filter that coaches use. And I've talked to coaches about this, like, because not every player is the same when it comes to NIL. Some of them don't care about it at all.
Yeah.
Most of them care about it some, but there are a lot of really good players who are like, whatever the standard deal is, I'll do that. And then if I'm good, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's not that out of the ordinary, but those are the ones that, like, if you were Kirby Smart, if you're Kalen DeBoer, if you're Ryan Day, those are the guys that you want, because they're going to come in and they're not going to be like, I'm so special, I don't have to compete for a starting job here. Like, no, if you go to Georgia, like, you have to compete for a starting job.
And things have changed too, right? We talk about Jaden Rashada. We talk, obviously, the deal the Athletic reported on with Nico Iamaleava. Things have changed. A lot of those funds have now been allocated to the portal with the really instant impact guys. I think you've seen the market kind of reset. Collectives have continued to get more professionalized. So I think the top 100 recruits do make good money, but it's still life-changing money, but it maybe wasn't the average 7-figure deal that we saw 2-3 years ago.
Which is, I thought the market would adjust. I didn't know it would adjust as quickly as it did. It's interesting. I'm sure there are economics majors who will write papers on this. There will be case studies on this someday about how this economy found its level so quickly. And that is one of the things. And we talked about it before NIL came into being. And I remember writing stuff saying, are you sure you want to bet on 17-year-olds like this? Does that seem like a very smart move? Like, wouldn't you want to pay more to retain your best players?
Yeah.
Which, as we found, that's what the best programs do. They pay the most to retain their best players.
Yes.
They don't pay a ton on the front end unless it's somebody they feel like is truly special.
And it's crazy how the tenor of the conversation has changed, and I'm sure we'll hear about it a lot this week. And the three of us are going to talk about it a lot in the next 18 months, but revenue sharing is coming. Yeah. How does that impact how athletes deals are constructed? What is the role of collectives? We continue to hear they're going to be really imperative, but this 2025 class is going to have to worry about that. And trying to figure out how they get their share of the revenue and things like that. I mean, we don't know the answers, and they're going to have to go through this process.
Ferris Khan in the chat, the $20 million quote unquote salary cap is actually pretty low. If you split it amongst all student athletes, men's and women's sports, it'd be about $60,000 an athlete.
Right.
If it's just football, it'd be $150,000 an athlete. That's the thing, Ferris. It is very low if you think about it in different terms. What does $20 million buy you in the NFL? 1 year of one good edge rusher. That's it.
Yeah.
And we're talking about that for an entire athletic department. So yes, it is. The numbers here are not anywhere near what they are in the pro sports. I mean, some of these NBA contracts that are getting thrown around are just sound absolutely ridiculous. Like, they're talking about Luka Doncic being like $100 million a year player at some point in the next few years. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about relatively small numbers compared to their professional counterparts. Now, they are professionals.
Yeah.
Once you get paid to do something, you're a professional.
Yeah.
And the NCAA can say they're banning pay for play all they want. It is what it is.
Someone asked me this last week, hey, do you think college sports is going to turn into a career? Because they're going to start making 6, 7.
Johnny Manziel's hanging in like Will Ferrell in Old School.
So my response to that was, for some, yes, but not overarchingly, because only such a small percentage go to the NFL and stuff. But the same elite talent is still going to go to the NBA or the NFL fast, because at the end of the day, that is where the most money is going to continue to be.
Much more.
Yeah, it's not even comparable.
Now, you can do the Sam Hartman. Like, there will be outliers like Sam Hartman who that year at Notre Dame for Sam Hartman was probably more lucrative
Yes.
than his first year as an undrafted free agent in the NFL.
Sure.
Will be. But
His beard did him a lot.
Oh man, the hair, the flow.
Hair, yeah.
Willie says it's actually going to be more like a $20 million floor versus a cap. The schools are going to be expected to spend the entire $20 million versus capping out at that number. I agree with Willie on that. And also, unless they get a Hail Mary from Congress that I don't think they're going to get, there will still be NIL. There will still be collectives because like they can't dial that back. They still have to let the players, like your Caitlin Clarks of the world, will still be doing State Farm ads.
Right.
But until they just let the schools pay them for their ability as players, which I'm telling you they're going to get to, some collective, somebody is going to fill the void where they're not getting their market value.
And this enforcement arm included in these settlement terms, I mean, yes, they have some teeth. Yes, they could limit collectives. Yes, they could reshape the NCAA, but they're all like non-existent unless Congress does something. And we all know how Congress has been the last 33 months.
Yeah, Greg Sankey said the enforcement piece of it was the House settlement was confidential, and he'd keep it that way. That when he talked to reporters last night. Yeah, because you don't want to talk about the details of that. And also, Pete and I were texting about this, which I find this hilarious. And this is another reason to believe that Congress is not going to bail them out. Do you want to be the congressperson who sponsored the law that got your school in trouble? Because it's all fun and games until they go after your school. You're thinking, oh, my school doesn't do that. All the others, your school does it because all of them do. Like
a great campaigning memechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, I would smear that person so badly if I run it. I would primary their ass in a heartbeat. Like you got our guys on probation. What are you doing?
You kill college sports. Yeah, like that. Those sorts of things will be hurled at people.
It's a tough soundbite.
It's
a tough soundbite to hear in court, man.
Imagine the attack ads. It would be amazing.
Golly.
Specifically in SEC country.
Oh
yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah. If you got those, imagine running for office in this fine state of Tennessee. If you enacted the law that got the volunteers in trouble, come on,
no boy,
you're never getting elected again.
The current state AG is going to bat to save the volunteers.
Exactly. And you notice he hasn't dropped that lawsuit yet.
No,
he put out a press release full of football analogies. I think.
Yep.
There was the word playbook was used.
Yep. Where maybe something like full court press or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not
mixing his metaphors.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, all forces go kind of thing. Good for him. Well, here's one thing I want to get y'all's opinion on. I feel like the thing we heard a lot about revenue sharing and with a capped revenue share was, okay, great, you'll allow more resources for more schools. But I'm doing the math here, and I'm not great with numbers, but I'm like, okay, Virginia Tech probably still has less money than Florida State. You give them both $20 million roughly. We just changed the numbers. The gap is the same.
What you've done is that you've actually widened the gap with certain schools because it's a percentage of the average revenue for the power conference schools. Right. So basically the average, whatever the average school is, and I don't know exactly where that, but if we were to go to the middle, we'd be probably somewhere at the bottom of the Big Ten or the SEC, which is still a lot of money. Like that school will be paying 22%. Right. Of its revenue. Some other school that is below that line is going to be paying 38% of its revenue.
Yeah. And the big one's paying 13,
right?
16.
Exactly.
Right? Which is a huge difference. And one thing we don't know the answer to, and it kind of gets to your question, JD, is like, okay, does Virginia Tech decide to only rev share $15 million a year, right?
Right. Which you can do. It's not a requirement. It's not a set salary floor.
The 20 mil is a cap, not the starting.
Gotcha.
So then there's like the questions, okay, like does a group of five say bye-bye to the collective and only do 2 million? Or do they save their pennies and go to the donor and really try to invest in the collective? Those are strategies that are going to have to be worked out in the future.
This is why I text both of y'all whenever something like this happens. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Explain this to me. I've seen Suits, but I don't know exactly how we're going about this right now.
I do love how it always comes back to Suits.
It does, man.
Yeah.
It does.
What would Harvey have done in this situation?
Golly.
But I am curious how schools handle this because a lot of this is because of donor fatigue. Right. They do not want to be asking the donors to fill the coffers of the collective. And the message from the AD, from the head coach, when they're saying, if we can't compete, it's because you're not digging deep enough. Like that does not go over well.
No.
So they don't want to be sending that message anymore. but you're still probably going to have to do that a little bit.
You're definitely going to have to still do it a little bit. And the other really big key thing about donor fatigue is, I mean, like if you're not winning a lot on the field, I think there's really legit concerns about maybe like why would a booster want to continue to pour their personal wealth into something that isn't working out on the field?
Yeah.
I think this year's really going to be telling too. I mean, you look across the board, a lot of that top 10 that you wrote about and JD, Texas, Oregon, Miami is up there, Ohio State. I mean, those are all schools who spent 8 figures on their roster.
And it's interesting that you bring that up because I would say Oregon, as good as those rosters have been, has not broken through. They were the best. They were the most talented team in the Pac-12 the last 2 years. They did not win the Pac-12 either of the last 2 years. Miami has spent and spent and spent since they hired Mario Cristobal, whether it's on coaches, on NIL. They have not broken through.
Yeah.
Texas has broken through. Texas made the 14 playoff last year. They have the highest projected win total, along with Oregon, Ohio State, and Georgia this year. I would argue that making the 14 playoff constitutes breaking through for them.
Yeah.
So that's the question: is are these schools going to say this is worth it? Like Ohio State, JD, they are all in on this roster this season. This is a national title or bust season. If you get to the end of the season and Ohio State didn't win a national title, and Oregon didn't win the national title, and Texas didn't win the national title, and Georgia, which certainly does NIL as well, but has not been as aggressive as some of these others in trying to improve the roster, Georgia wins again, or Alabama wins again. The ones that were doing it, just had the advantage already. Do you go, maybe this doesn't actually get it?
Yeah, I think there's probably some disappointment there, obviously. And there's also you go back to the drawing board and say, okay, where did we go wrong? Was it the staff? Was it the roster? My gut reaction is, if I am a person with a lot of money that wants to see my football team win, what can I control besides throw more money at it? Or do I throw more money in different parts of the roster? So I think you probably still would feel some responsibility to keep throwing money at things. But I think the interesting part about this, you talk about the schools like Kentucky after they played Georgia last year. They're saying, well, hey, Georgia's got X amount of players. We got to have more resources.
Right.
From a booster, I'm saying I got to see you win more games to feel good about knowing where my money's going is going to serve the ultimate purpose of us beating the Georgias eventually. So it's kind of this chicken or the egg situation.
Another school that we're going to keep an eye on too is Ole Miss, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Retooled that roster. NIL is strong there. They're definitely operating in the 8 figures as well. And does Lane Kiffin crash the 12-team playoff? I mean, that is easily one of the top headlines of the offseason.
They've got to make it, because they would have made it last year. They've certainly upgraded the roster, especially along the line of scrimmage. Like they worked very hard in the transfer portal to get this roster where they want it to. You got to make the playoff.
Yeah.
Right.
But the thing is, you also have got to make the playoff at Missouri. You've got to make the playoff at Tennessee. You've got to make the playoff at Georgia. You've got to make the playoff at LSU. You've got to make the playoff at Alabama. And this is just the SEC.
Yeah. We're doing the math here. And I'm like, okay, a lot of people got to make the playoff.
Yeah.
Only 12 spots. And by the way, the G5's getting one of those spots. So there's 11 spots for y'all.
Exactly. And don't forget about the ACC and Big 12 too.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, now it's interesting. The SEC's meeting in Destin, they will not be having the existential discussions about perception and all of that the ACC did. Like, we're not going to have that discussion of, well, how many at-larges can the SEC get? Will they get any at-larges?
Right.
Like, they're going to get at-larges. But the question is it going to be 3? Is it going to be 3 at-larges in their champ?
Right.
Is it going to be 2 at-larges in their champ? That we don't know. And that I think is weighing heavily.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you mentioned it, right? Like ACC meetings, you have coaches telling you, Andy, like, we need to change our perception about football. Well, meanwhile, I don't think the SEC could really have a stronger brand identity at the moment.
Yeah, I think everything is good at the pool with the head coaches from the SEC. I think there's not a care in the world. And it's funny because the expanded playoff, when we were, well, let's say 10 years ago, people were saying, got to expand the playoff. The SEC will get what's coming to them, and it's going to make sure we get more parity. Like, those folks that were saying that 10 years ago, you're going to watch a playoff with what? 5,
it's all
6
fun and games
SEC
until the 4th
teams?
place team in the SEC beats your conference champ in the playoff.
It's going to be a rude awakening.
That's the problem. And it's not going to be necessarily a rude awakening. It will be if they do that. But I think it's great because we finally get to test that theory out.
Yes.
Because you had the people saying the SEC is a media construction. the teams aren't really that good except the ones at the top. Yes,
Right.
the Alabamas and the Georgias are good, but are they really that deep?
Yeah.
And now we'll find out, because we'll find out if the fourth best SEC team is in there and whoops up on the second best Big Ten team.
Right.
Like that tells you something. But if the second best SEC team gets whooped by the third best Big Ten team, well, wow, all of a sudden, maybe we're looking at things differently.
And this house settlement that we continue to talk about and has nothing in it from our understanding about the future of college football. Those questions still need to be sorted out. Is there a super league?
Yeah.
Does the SEC and Big Ten break off? Does everything go under the CFP umbrella? Those are questions that we're going to continue need answers to in the next months and maybe even years to come.
Well, and in the playoff, we've got this 12-team playoff. We've not even seen one of these happen yet.
Yeah.
And they're already talking about going to 14 by 2026.
Yeah.
And I would like to see this first.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated by the dynamics of this, by how expectations change, because I just made a list of schools in the FCC who feel like they have to make the playoff
Right.
this year. So I still don't think it's going to be just making the playoff. Like,
No.
if you're James Franklin at Penn State, you're now expected to make the playoff. But you got to win.
Is
in
the
playoff too,
expectation
right?
now, right? Make the playoff and at least make the quarters? Is that like the
Right.
expectation
Yeah.
in the sport?
I think it's if you give a mouse a cookie, it's going to want some milk. Like, hey, Ole Miss, if you get in the playoff, we're going to want to win a game or two. If we get to the quarterfinals,
Right.
gosh dang it, we're going to have to win a natty, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's that whole, if you give a mouse a cookie, they're going to want to win a playoff game.
Yeah.
And one more thing I'll say
My
about the
kids
SEC.
love those books.
It's a great book. Great book.
It is.
It's a whole series.
Real page turner.
Yeah.
Real page turner. But I will say, if the SEC is this big media conspiracy construction, the NFL draft is in on it. So that's,
Yes,
we have
I
that.
know.
Yeah.
Listen, but you can't convince some people when you say here, look, these people's jobs rely on them picking the best players, and year after year they pick the most from this one league. Like, it's common sense, everybody,
Sure.
but people don't want to believe that. And now we're going to see it. We're going to see it in action, because yes, I get it. If you're a fan of a Big Ten team, I'll go back to 2010. 2010, that Fletcher Cox-led Mississippi State team finished 15th in the country.
Sure.
And 5th in the SEC West. Like, it was a deep league that year. There were other years like 2014 where the league was not that deep, but it has been fairly deep. It feels fairly deep this year, though I would argue that the ACC feels a little bit deeper at the top than it has.
Yeah.
The Big Ten, thanks to what it has added, is much deeper than it was. But yeah, we're going to find out if that theory is true. Is the SEC really that deep? The
Right.
playoff will tell us that.
And how deep is the Big Ten? We don't really know
Yeah.
the answer at this point. This is going to be a huge barometer of that.
Yeah.
In 2024.
Actually, well, you just made me think of something, because I've said all along, let's say Florida State and Clemson manage to get out of the ACC. What happens next? Because they don't have an obvious landing spot. They don't have a standing invite to the Big Ten or the SEC. But I've said over and over again, if you're the Big Ten and you look at your schedules and you look at the SEC schedules, you would like to sprinkle some more in there to make your schedule look more like the SEC schedule. Also, in terms of the depth of your league at the top, I think you kind of need that.
Yeah. And that's why all the conspiracy theorists believe that those schools will go to the Big Ten. Now, we obviously need to see how that plays out, if it does. But and then yet again, it brings up the conversation we talked about last summer. What happens to the bottom teams in the league? Do they stay put? Do we see teams get cut? We don't know the answer. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm just saying
Okay. Tell me if I'm crazy.
Okay.
Either one of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see anybody getting cut. Like, I don't see Vanderbilt or Indiana getting cut from their leagues because they're kind of grandfathered in. And I also think the psychology of this for the bigger schools, somebody has to eat the losses.
Yeah.
And you don't want to.
Yeah.
No.
Who's carrying the academic weight too? Like, and how much does that matter? Because I'm like, hey, Vandy, there's some prestige baked into that, that gold V.
Hey, the SEC just got Texas,
that's a
baby.
big one. Yeah, Texas.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
That's not an easy school to get into either. There's a lot of factors that I'm like, do we really want to cut Vandy from this whole thing? Are we sure that's the best for everybody involved here? I don't know that it is.
Yeah, and that's the question that we're going to have to get answered. And Pete, I think we don't know the answer to that probably until some of these court cases get decided. If there's congressional action, all of that will guide the next waves of realignment. Though, as we talked about all this stuff, and my head is still spinning as I wrap my brain around all the Texas and Oklahoma people being in Destin for the SEC spring meetings. And then, they just had meetings out in California with the Big Ten where they had Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA. Everybody keeps talking about NIL, the House settlement, all that being disruptive to the fans. What's happened with realignment is far more disruptive to the average fan than how they ship money to the players.
Yep.
Yeah, without a doubt.
No questions there. And man, the Big 12 is going to look different. The AC, I can't really wrap my head around still about Stanford and Cal in the ACC. That
I
just
know.
seem right.
Yeah. So guys, if you didn't watch, because it was on a holiday, so you might not have seen the ACC ceilings and floors show with Roddy Jones that we ran yesterday. Stanford's schedule, holy crap, they got hazed by the ACC. But it is nuts because they are going, like, they go to Clemson, they go to NC State, like Stanford rolling into Raleigh.
Brutal.
Against
absolutely
a really
brutal.
Good NC State team.
Against a really good team, but it's just gonna look so weird. And then Cal and Florida State play this year. It's gonna be bizarre
in a conference game.
Yeah,
Cal and Florida
I
State.
Looked at SMU schedule, and River, our producer, can help me out
He's
here.
gonna pop it right up on the screen.
But like,
man,
in the near future, SMU and BC are gonna play, and it's gonna be a conference game, and that's just gonna be wild.
Not this year, but so they get their first ACC game is Florida State in Dallas, and they're at Duke. SMU at Duke in Durham. They're at Virginia. They're going to Charlottesville. SMU Cal is a conference game in Dallas. That's a great stadium, by the way. For folks who haven't been, like, to be in a stadium that size, to get to see a game involving the Florida State Seminoles. It's not a day for our Game Time ad, but I'm telling you right now, if you go to Game Time and look that up, you get some pretty good deals on tickets still for that game. That is going to be a really, really fun game. SMU's first, as I said, Big 12. They tried to get in the Big 12 for so many years. SMU's first ACC game. And SMU is the walk-on of conference realignment.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. That's a great comp. That's a great comp.
So great.
Highland Park is cool too. Like, if you're a Florida State fan, check it out.
If you're
like,
loaded.
If you're there for the weekend, you're like, hey, let's go to In-N-Out. Let's go. Different topic. Lots to do in Dallas.
Okay. Let's go there. Let's go there because I have not had JD on the show since he said this on his own show, The Hard Count with JD Pickell. This was not planned, but we got to talk about this. You called USC the In-N-Out fries of college football.
Absolutely.
The In-N-Out fries of college football.
Absolutely. Yeah. So In-N-Out fries, for those that are unfamiliar,
are garbage.
Get a bit of a bad rap. Now, if you grew up in Southern California, you understand
they're still garbage.
In-N-Out, you get yourself a double, get some animal fries. The key for me, Andy, with In-N-Out, because I agree, there are better fries at other establishments.
All other establishments,
for me, if you order them well done, you add some salt, game changer. So my thing with
why don't they just make them like that?
I'm with you. Hey, if I were running In-N-Out, we'd do that every single day of the week. However, you add some salt to that defense with Danton Lynn, a little more experience. Kind of try and work the port a little bit.
Long, rangy corners.
Big Gavin Meyer from Wyoming. Big get. So you're adding some salt. We can just get a little more well done. All right. We can kind of put it in the oven, maybe in the fryer. I don't know how they're doing those things over the In-N-Out kitchen, but if we can just get a little more well done during the practice periods, might be not world class, might be in better position.
Here's the thing. When you said that, it occurred to me, well, that I was mad because you made the perfect analogy. It really was the perfect analogy, and here's why. My issue with In-N-Out fries is this. In-N-Out makes probably the best fast food hamburger available. Don't talk to me about Five Guys. That thing costs like $12.
Yes,
like that's
the Ohio States of
not the same thing. Different category.
Sure.
So In-N-Out makes this incredible burger. They pair it with the crappiest French fries in the world. All you have to do is make better fries. And you're the best in the world. You are world class. You know other places make better fries. You know better fries exist. So why don't you just make better fries? And this is my issue with Lincoln Riley. You know your team stink at playing defense. They have always stunk at playing defense. Whether it was Mike Stoops as the defensive coordinator or Alex Grinch as the defensive coordinator. If Danton Lynn comes in here and you still can't play defense, it's not Danton Lynn's fault.
Nope.
It's Lincoln Riley's fault.
Yeah.
Like, you know Georgia exists. You know Alabama exists. They have practice schedules. There are people who've worked at those schools. You can say, hey, dude who was the 75th analyst on Alabama staff, how did Nick Saban run his practice on Tuesdays?
Yes.
How do you run his practice on Wednesdays? What about in November? And just do that.
Yes. Standardized recipes is a massive thing in the fast food industry. Let's standardize the recipe a little bit. Let's like just like you said, let's go talk to people that are in that kitchen, in that building. Let's tinker with it a little bit, because the offense, going back to that comparison, the burgers are great. The offense, I mean, nobody's questioning Lincoln Riley.
About the offense.
Like Miller Moss is going to be a first-year starting quarterback, and we're all kind of assuming is going to be more than fine. You know what I mean?
I got some follow-up questions, but we'll hold them for another day and time.
I love it.
Speaking of the West Coast, we're going to talk about somebody from USC's rival.
Yep.
Rest in peace, Bill Walton, passed away at 71 after a battle with cancer on Monday. And just one of the shining lights in the world of sports. Incredible player at UCLA. Obviously, we were all too young to remember him as a UCLA player. I was around when he was on the tail end of his NBA career, but these guys weren't. We mostly remember him for his work at NBC, at ESPN, calling college basketball games, and especially the Pac-12 games in later years when he would talk about the Conference of Champions. And you know, I don't think people were making light of Bill Walton's death when they said this yesterday, but it's true. He wound up not having to live a day without the Conference of Champions in his life, because one of the saddest things I thought about when the Pac-12 kind of disintegrated and crumbled, and you knew it was going to be over come June 30th of this year, was it what I remember thinking this on the day it all fell apart when Oregon and Washington went to the Big Ten and the other schools went to the Big 12. Like, what's Bill Walton going to say about this? What's he like? This is the Conference of Champions. Yeah. And I just love the Conference of Champions. You know, he's doing a game from the McHale Center in Tucson. It's unbelievable. And all the tributes from Bill Walton's broadcast partners like Dave Pasch, the photo he put out of Bill Walton. Like, I don't even know what he's wearing in the photo that Dave Pasch put out. It looks like a gymnastics singlet or a wrestling singlet, maybe. Like that. And then Jason Benetti, who's now at Fox, who worked with Bill at ESPN. And he said Bill sent him an email in 2020. It said, put the music on. As soon as it doesn't seem right, change the music, change the station, but don't turn it off. Like, that's the sort of thing you got from Bill Walton. Grant Wall, who the late Grant Wall, I used to work with at SI, had an incredible story when Bill's kids were all playing college basketball, where he's in a van with Bill Walton, like going around to all these games, and it just nobody squeezed the juice out of life more than Bill Walton did.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sticks out in my memory of Bill Walton is the way that he just was so obviously enjoying himself every single broadcast in a world of television where you can kind of tell, okay, people are coached up, people are trying to be polished and trying to be a certain way. Like, Bill Walton is just having the absolute time of his life calling UCLA, Arizona State, or whatever game it was. I think that is rare. It's infectious. It's special. And it's something that we're going to miss a lot in the sports world.
Oh, yeah. If you have not looked at the clip, this is one that has made the rounds on social media, and I'll find it and retweet it today. There's a clip from a documentary of Bill Walton when he played for the Boston Celtics. So he's playing with Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Danny Ainge, Dennis Johnson. He takes them to a Grateful Dead concert in Boston.
It's the best story.
It is incredible. Him talking about, them meeting Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir, and him explaining to the Grateful Dead the logistical challenges of having the best Boston Celtics at your show in Boston. Like, it is awesome. And so, please rest in peace, Bill Walton. Thank you for all the time you gave us. And it was unbelievable, as you would say. Guys, thanks for today. Pete, JD, thank you.
You bet.
We're going to have some fun here. We'll be talking to some of the best recruits in the country. We'll be talking about that on the show. We'll have them on the show in the next few days and weeks. And we've also got a star-studded cast of On3 folks from our team sites, from the national site. We'll be checking in with all of them, and you can see it right here at Indy Staples On3. We'll talk to you tomorrow.